So what if somebody decided in 1945 that a couple of years later they wanted to have a modern Nelson? Well, you can. This is Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts. You can build whatever you want. Within reason, of course. So this is the Nelson. Reimagined. With a couple of 20-inch guns. And she's out for blood against a couple of German battleships. Let's first have a look at the design. And then we're going to continue to see how well this battle is going to develop. So, a Nelson in 1950, what would that look like? Well, let's say that aircraft carriers aren't a problem. Of course, we're going to have to add 20-inch guns. In case you're seeing some different stats on those 20-inch guns, it's because I'm running the Dreadnought Improvement Project. Now, the Nelson had 3 triple 20, or 3 triple, not 20s. That's what my Nelson's going to have. I think the British might actually be one of the factions that can actually pull this off, because their main towers aren't that big. The American towers, the German towers, they take up tons and tons and tons of space, and you can't do this, where you shift them very, very far back, which means that you're going to be stuck with less space on the bow, and something that just, well, doesn't work for them. Thankfully, with the British, depending on how far you have to put that secondary tower, you can actually get away with this. If I make the ship a bit wider, I might be able to do it even better. Yeah, there we go. That's a bit much. Pull this thing here. Cycle the whole thing backwards. Look at that deck space. That's a lot of deck space. I might actually be able to make it, well, even bigger. Because I can add... Well, yeah, I guess this works. Like, I could have added maybe even 4 turrets. But I still have to add a funnel. I still have to add some armor. I still have to make sure that the guns get radar guidance. So let's go with this. As for their propellant, let's go with TNT-4. Oh, sorry, that's their explosive triple base. Now, as for their capability to deal damage, I'm starting this battle at about 25 kilometer range, so that's about 17 inches of armor that I need penned. But that is not necessarily counting the right type of armor. We've got 200% armor quality, so I have to account for that. And, of course, the enemy might have a lot of armor at that point. I could make the barrels longer, but I think that would just lead to crazy ranges. I mean, my range with AP is 70 kilometers. I do wonder what happens if you extend the barrels. Well, it's not even that big of a jump. It's 74 kilometers. What if I take 10% off? Yeah, it drops a bit, but not even that much. Your reload's about 60 seconds, and at 25 kilometer range, you can pen 3.5 inches of deck armor. This might actually do a little better if it isn't for the problem of accuracy. Because now I'm looking at an accuracy of about 6 to 8.5%, which is still incredible. If I go to, let's say, 20%, I can get that accuracy up to about 11. So yeah, it doesn't really matter that much. Let's just go with this. Minus 10%. We're going to do this, and then we're going to add the very heavy autoloaders. That's 6,000 tons. Better turret rotation. Slightly more barbettes, some better engines. Of course, we're going to have to add a funnel on there. And now the ship is overweight. And that's kind of my concern. The ship is going to be so heavy because of all the turrets. The good news, however, is that these turrets are all centralized. So if I'm able to condense the ship a bit more, I might be able to make the citadel smaller, and that would mean less armor. Could even mean a smaller ship. Here. This saved me a little bit of weight. And let's see, I also want to have some secondary guns, because, well, using this against a destroyer or a cruiser is fun, but not necessarily very useful. Because you'll be waiting another 40 seconds for the next couple of shells to arrive. So let's say we want to have a couple of, what, 8s? Would have been very nice if we could put those on there. So let's go with 7s. Yeah, pretty good. Can those freely rotate? Yep. Excellent. Good coverage on those 7s as well. Let's put this one facing forward, ideally. Of course, their brother on the other side is not going to do that. There. Now, how am I going to save some... I'm going to save some weight. Where am I going to save some weight? 25 kilometers, 7 inches of deck pen. Good lord. I can get behind that. Where are we going to save the weight? Okay, the main belt's a bit heavily armored. Considering that I have 20-inch guns, they can get bigger. They can get to 20.9. That definitely wouldn't fit on this ship, but more importantly, they can pen a lot. They can, in this case, pen, let's say, 20-kilometer range. They can pen 32 inches of belt armor and about 6 inches of deck armor. Now, the good news is the main deck is heavily armored. I got 8.6, 7.9 on, sorry, 4.7 and 5.7. Let's reduce that a bit. Let's say 6 inches there, 4 inches here, and 4 inches there. That does make it a bit safer and also a bit lighter. The main belt of 24 inches is probably too much, but I'm not really sure if I can actually fix it that well. Yeah, there we go. We're now pretty balanced. I got 7 tons left. Let's for good measure pretend that we want to put some anti-air on this ship. Although it's a 98,000 ton, well, target, really. These 2 inchers are not really going to intimidate anybody. As for reducing speed, it's possible. I'd rather not, because 25 knots feels slow as is. Increasing displacement might help a little bit. Yeah, I got about 1,000 tons, 1,500 tons in reserve now. So what are we going to do with that? Is it possible to make this one a free spinner? So that I can do, yep, I can do a 360 20-inch no-scope. That's important because if something does happen to appear, let's say over there, and my turret is looking over there, it's going to have to turn all the way around, which would take a very long time. These things have a turret rotation of about 1 degree per second, so it would take them, let's say they have to make a 270-degree turn. It would take them 270 seconds to get there. So you'll be waiting for a very long time. If you have a turret that can do 360 degrees and is pointing over there, and you want it to start turning over there, you only need to do 90 degrees, which is still 1.5 minutes. It's still a lot of time, but it should be okay. Let's make this thing a bit more heavily armored, especially in the deck department, because if I can help it, I am not going to be receiving any ranged hits on my belt, and as such, I won't need as much of it. There. The guns are armored with 29 inches on the side, 12.5 inch on the top. I'm going to reduce this a bit to, let's say, 27 and 14. That's a bit heavy. The barbettes, yeah, 23 inches, 22 inches should be fine. There we go. 105% engine efficiency means the ship is okay moving backwards and forwards. But, well, this thing is going to take a lot of time to turn around. If ever. It has a turning circle, supposedly, of 1 kilometer. Whether that'll actually be the case, I'd rather doubt. So, let's see how well this thing does against 2 German battleships. I'm going to have to rename it, of course. The modern Nelson. Let's go. Time for the Nelson to prove her worth. These 20-inch guns are potent. They fire every 40 seconds. Which, especially considering their size, is very impressive. They have a lot of punch, and especially at range, they can actually deal quite a lot of plunging fire. Because their muzzle velocity for armor piercing as well as HE shells is actually not that slow. Or sorry, not that fast, leading to shells plunging on the last part of their trajectory. I'm going to slow the ship down a bit. With the first salvo, we're already getting about 9% accuracy. And that is only going to get better. Now, what are we facing today? We're facing a couple of Germans. The Germans also went for a, well, Nelson-esque design. With a couple of bow turrets and one on the stern. It's a bit of a curious design with that barbette down in the middle between A and B turret. But the AI is known for making some more curious choices. As for the range, we're, yeah, about 25 kilometers out. Now, normally I would go fully broadside, but in this case I don't really have to, because I don't have a stern battery to work with. So I can just keep this thing as is. Ow! That hurt. That went right through the forebelt. Really? I wasn't expecting that. Especially considering that these German ships seem to have slightly shorter barrels. That muzzle velocity shouldn't be that high. And you're ricocheting my shells? Oh. Switch to high explosive. You're ricocheting the shells? Interesting. It's not impossible, it just means that this thing has a ton of armor. And please don't hit me again. Okay, here we go. 11-inch high 20-inch high explosive. This should at least do some kind of damage if it hits, which we're not getting anywhere near. And keep in mind, I only have 9 20-inch barrels. They have 8 17.5-inch barrels per ship. So I do find myself quite outgunned here. Hopefully, I can very quickly make one of these ships go away. Unfortunately, it seems that range finding is having a bit of an issue. Come on, Nelson. Oh, blocked. So, yeah, they fired 34 shells at me so far. One of them hit. Sorry, 2 of them hit. One of them got blocked. One of them actually penned for almost 1,000 points of damage. Thankfully, expert damage control has my flooding under control, and buoyancy is holding. And now we're getting somewhere. That was an actual penetrating hit with high explosive. And we've also over-penned their torpedo launcher, and penned their 4 belt. So what I might have hit before was either a turret, a very heavily armored one, or maybe their 4 deck, and I ricochet off of that. And now we're only getting a partial pen on the main belt. Yeah, that makes sense. Range is now decreased to about 16 kilometers. The ship is still very heavily angled, which means my chance to ricochet off of that ship is pretty serious. Why my ship is still range finding is beyond me. At this point, we should have the range dialed in, and we should be able to start landing hits respectively. But sometimes Dreadnoughts, there we go, just does this. You need to click the target a couple times and it'll fire. We have nowhere near identification of this ship, so I don't know what sort of armor they have. But under this angle, especially at this range, it might be a bit troubling. Slow the ship down. I'm going to try and go bow in, but the problem is my bow isn't that heavily armored. So I am starting to get a bit worried about this engagement range, and especially with a speed of 25 knots, I can't very well disengage. I cannot turn the ship around without losing all my firepower, and I cannot exactly tank any shells because I simply don't have the armor for that. So we're just going to have to try and make a stand and deal with one of these ships as quickly as possible, cutting their firepower in half. Yep, that ricocheted. So far, so good. But at some point, probably sooner rather than later, this will go through. Come on. That looks pretty... Nope, missed him. The 7-inchers are doing what they can, but I don't really expect a whole lot of results from them against a very heavily armored German battleship. Ricochets. Yep, that penned twice. Come on, Nelson. We're only 6.5 kilometers out. And supposedly these guys have torpedo launchers. Or had torpedo launchers. I'm not sure if they still have them. Here's the good news. They're going to start going over my bow. Which means I might, there we go, be able to start using armor piercing. Especially with 100% accuracy. And land some actual hits that seriously deal damage. Nope. That pinned me in return. What's her speed? Still 17 knots. Yeah, it's 100,000 tons. It doesn't slow down very well. No! You ricocheted? You ricocheted as well? How much armor do you have? 18.5 on the main belt. 4 and aft are not that heavily armored. 0 on the superstructure. And 24-inch... That's what I ricocheted off of. 24-inch on their 17-inch turrets. 23.8-inch on the barbettes, and about 12 inches on the top of that 17-incher. I'm not penning that. Okay. Their chance to pen me is probably pretty good. Even as my ship is angled. And, well, it's angled towards the Kaiser Wilhelm the Große, not towards their sister ship. This is going to probably lead to a very quick demise of the modern Nelson. Oh, come on. Where did that shell even go? Ow, ow, ow. Yeah, and now we are going to have some other difficulties, because now I'm be ramming the Ostfriesland. That's not exactly how I intended to have this ship deal damage, but if that's the way that it's going to go, well, strap in. Here comes the ram. Partial pen? What the hell? I am very disappointed with these 20 inchers. Where's the damage? Oh, this is very unwelcome. 19-inch torp only. And I do have some anti... Well, I do have some torpedo protection, but not that much. Come on. Make it happen. This is bizarre. Like, yeah, sure. They got a good main armor build. 18.5 inch. But I'm 2.5 kilometers out. At 2.5 kilometers, I can pen 45 inches of armor. This shouldn't be happening. Switch to the Ostfriesland, just for a change. Oh, you missed them. You can't even pen that. And that's pretty broadside. Come on, Nelson. Wow. Now, I'm not using the best type of ballistic shells, but I was expecting a bit more than just this. There we go, one hit. It actually dealt damage. Yeah, we're gonna have to go back to the drawing board. What if I give them standard barrel shell, or standard barrel length, and then make sure that they also get some slightly different shells? That was 3,000 tons that got added. Or what if I go semi-ballistic with super heavy shells? Sorry, not semi-ballistic, semi-armor piercing. It means that they don't ricochet as much. They also have far less bite, but they should still be able to deal serious amounts of damage if they do pen. The problem is, where am I going to find all of this displacement? It's going to have to come out of somewhere, and I'm afraid it's going to be the main belt. Wow, it's not really moving the needle. Okay, we're going to go for a single hull bottom. And then we're going to have to reduce speed to 24 knots, 23 knots. Yeah, we're now definitely a Nelson, because the Nelsons in 1925 were launched with a 23 knot speed. Yeah, 21.5. There we go. Alright, second attempt. Let's see if we can actually pen our new enemy with these, well, slightly inferior shells. Now, I'd like to call this round 2, but that would not really be doing it justice, because we're facing a different opponent, as the AI has generated a different ship. This is again a German battleship, this time around armed with a couple of 13 inchers, so at least maybe my ship will last longer. As for their armor, I have no idea. They do seem to have gone pretty hefty on the secondaries, sporting 30 4.3s, a bunch of 5.4s, and 3.4 inch guns. And as for torpedo launchers, most likely some underwater options. But yeah, there we go. Long range as well, 19.8 kilometers. Alright, Nelson. Here we go again. 25 clicks out. 10% chance to hit. Ow. Nope, armor piercing, please. I know that HE will damage the ship, yeah. HE is not the problem. I'm gonna actually deal damage with AP. I'm gonna see if the modern Nelson could work. Because I think it can. Yeah, partial pen. Well, if we can keep getting partial pens for about 500 damage, that would help. That would work. If we hit, that would help. 20%. Come on. Now we're getting somewhere. Damage the main gun. Setting some fires, but that's not really the main deal. If I can eliminate one of their main turrets, that would seriously reduce their firepower. And as such, give me more time to farm them. Because those 13-inchers, they got rate of fire on me. By a serious margin. Damage to main tower. And they're definitely quickly closing on me, which would make my situation much, much more precarious. Because they will have far better rate of fire. And their chance to pen is going to go up. Why are you range finding again? You know where the target is. And they're very quickly approaching. We do appear to have a slight barbecue going on outside the deck, but don't worry about that. There we are. That's the stuff. That was a hit for 4.5k, I think. It scrolled by so fast. Yeah, 4.5k and another 4.5k. Still, they're going to be still pushing me in my position. And this is again where the modern Nelson kind of fails, because I have to try and keep the ship at, let's say, well, this kind of an angle. Which would mean I am very susceptible to getting penned, even by 13-inch guns. That was good damage. Come on, do it again. Yes. And again. Yes. Ship eliminated. Nassau is no longer here. Their torpedoes, however, are. We're going to be looking at a 20-inch torpedo up close. And unfortunately, I don't think we can speed away from that torp. As for their armor scheme, 22-inch main belt, 15-inch forebelt, 14-inch main deck with a 17-inch foredeck. This thing is extremely heavily armored. And yet, my semi-armor piercing shells were able to go right through it, especially at shorter ranges. Now, I would really not want to fight another battleship at 2-kilometer range. That's not necessarily how this thing is going to perform best. If I were to use something like this in a campaign, I would probably try and keep her, I don't know, 15, 20 clicks away from the enemy. Ow! Good lord. Especially considering that I'd be able to have cruisers screen for this ship and use 20-inch guns to slam other, for example, heavy cruisers, so that my cruisers can take some shots, and especially torpedoes, at enemy battle cruisers and battleships. I tend to not have battleships counter battleships or battle cruisers counter battle cruisers. I tend to have battleships counter battle cruisers and heavy cruisers. And basically every class, if you will, targets something 1 or 2 classes below it. Except for destroyers. I find destroyers to be really good in potential against battleships. Oh, come on, rotate the turrets! This is when that 1-degree turret rotation is coming to be, well, a serious detriment to this ship. Uh-oh. Speaking of detriment. Ow. This is it for the Nelson. This is it for the Nelson. No! One was a dud. Okay. Now here's the problem. Previously, when I had the 10-inch shorter barrels, these turrets would actually turn fairly quickly. And they'd be able to turn through the ship, or over the bow of the ship. Now they're going to have to go all the way around, meaning that by the time that they actually find their target, the target's going to be somewhere completely different. All the while, I'm flooding, meaning that perhaps I'll not even be able to fire any guns at all, because the ship is listing to starboard that bad. Any damage that we've done so far has been with the 2-inch and the 7-inch guns. And the Germans are generally unimpressed. Come on! That 120-incher is almost on point. Please don't make it wait for everything else. Look at that, Germans just speeding right along. Ow. It's a good thing they're not turning the ship around, lest I'd be in trouble with their torpedo launchers again. But their torpedo launchers are almost reloaded anyway. Fire! Nope. This thing is just running circles around me. Yeah. I think right now, with this particular loadout, the modern Nelson is a bit of a bust. Nevertheless, it's an interesting concept to explore. If I would build it again, I would probably go for an ABX format. Just have one turret on the stern. So you'll always have at least a little bit of firepower. And you're not so dependent upon having your bow pointed at the enemy. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what your thoughts are on the more modern Nelson. And I shall see you guys soon for more videos.